Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, March 20th, 2025. Time to try this whole damn thing all over again. We're working on it. We're getting there. Luckily, Greg Dworkin knows what most of the sounds that are usually going on are, and when they come in and when they go out. Now we'll just have to give each other extra clues. We're working our way through Zoom. Zoom has some, I don't know, I would say some user interface issues to work out, but I'm sure all the Zoom guys know exactly how to do all this stuff because they programmed it and everybody else is an idiot and they can't figure it out. It's weird that there are two different chat areas that you can be chatting with somebody in, and one of them you can see while you're talking to somebody and one of them you can't, and one of them when you stop talking to somebody all the things that you type to one another disappear, and the other one they don't. But I don't know. We're still working it out, trying to figure things out, and I still can't get, I've been puzzling on it over a couple of hours yesterday, spent trying to re-engineer things to see if there's some way I could just pipe the sound out. And now I have my doubts whether it was ever really working in Zoom. I can't see any real reason why it should have been working in Skype, why it was working in Skype. But I tried changing outputs and plugging things into other places, and no dice. And then, as a result of all the tinkering, I should have thought about this earlier. I figured, I must have left the settings switched somewhere. And I found it, or Justice found it for me, saying that the prelude music that we used to play our way in sounded a little echoey. And I think, in an attempt to try to route the music, the soundboard to somewhere else, I may have doubled things up a little bit, but I think I got the setting right back now. Sounds good, no echo in my head. And too bad. I found a way to engineer around. I can make the break sounds happen in and be captured in Zoom, and I think also go out on the stream. That's the other weird part about it, is you kind of got to make sure that the stuff is going out to the rest of you as well. And was all the music okay yesterday? We'll see whether it's all in the same place today. I guess we would have heard from Justice by now. Were it the case that the music was not going through on the stream. But we can engineer a way around it. It's just very odd. I can't get it to capture the sound. I can get it to capture system sound. If the computer thinks it's playing it, that's fine. But for whatever reason, if I'm playing music or any sound through an app that isn't resident on the desktop, it says, I'm just not going to capture that sound. So I don't know. If we have any computer and audio engineers, I could ask DOGE, but, they're busy playing Fortnite and upending the federal government. Lots to catch up on there. There's more news in the USIP versus DOGE case, and it's not great. They had their day in court yesterday, and they drew Judge Beryl Howell, who usually doesn't stand for this kind of stuff, and didn't. And was very upset and really gave him what for in court, but then took a short recess, kind of came back in ashen and said, well, we're probably not going to do anything about this right now. And that seems kind of weird. I don't know whether she got a phone call in chambers threatening her family or what. But, the up-to-date situation here as well. Let's do some more briefing. But she actually kind of did say on the way out the door from yesterday's hearing, ordinarily, I'd probably do something about this, but I'm a little bit afraid that this will end in an armed standoff between USIP and federal government agents, except from the perspective of the federal government agents holing up inside the building like Cliven Bundy and the Malheur Wildlife Reserve folks being the ones refusing to come out. And I guess she just wasn't quite ready to deal with that, but yeah, it's getting crazy out there, and we got a lot of work to do trying to figure things out. And of course, more stories of people being, if not snatched up and stashed away in El Salvador, having their credentials questioned as they enter the country for no particular reason, just in passing. I'll mention a French academic on his way to a conference, stopped at the airport, had his social media profile searched. They found anti-Trump statements. I know, that's very difficult to believe. But that was enough for them to deny him entry into the United States, apparently. So he turned around and went home. He got lucky. He didn't have to go and have his head shaved and be sent to El Salvador. But that's the sort of thing that's going on now. So Canadian citizens with work permits being snatched up off the street. Of course, anybody brown-skinned who might plausibly look Latino, same thing. And now at the various gates of entry into the country, and I'm starting to wonder about the safety of American citizens leaving the country and then coming back and finding out that they have to surrender their electronic devices to a social media search to see whether anybody thinks that Donald Trump would be offended by anything you ever said.
To a 19-year-old with tattoos.
Hey. Yeah, right. Well, you're talking about a 19-year-old with tattoos who's a gang member and has to go to El Salvador?
No,
or
the guy who's deciding to do the search because, they hired me for DOGE and I'm just going to do it.
I'm working my way into DOGE.
Now, my tattoos are Christian national, so it's okay.
That's right, yeah.
Because, it's a gang tattoo, but it's the kind of gang tattoo that Pete Hegseth has.
Right, yeah. Pete Hegseth is in about 6 of these gangs, and he probably wouldn't protest so much if he shaved his head. But, of course, imprisoning him in El Salvador, you just have to wait. Wait and see whether he ends up in prison in El Salvador in some future change of regime.
So that whole El Salvador story is insane. I mean, we're paying them to keep these people.
Yep.
They admit that a lot of them are innocent.
Yep.
They have no reason to put them there. They did it anyway. And the courts will catch up. But, today's first piece that we're going to talk about
the very first one.
is called How Trump is Trying to Consolidate Power Over Courts, Congress, and More.
Yes.
His expansive interpretation of presidential power has become the defining characteristic of his second term, which is true. It's not popular, and he's overstepping his executive authority, but, he does it every day.
Yeah, he does. The El Salvador thing is absolutely outrageous. We'll have to keep an eye on that. I'm starting to wonder about, does Venezuela go to war with El Salvador at some point? Only if they really think the majority of the people being stashed there are Venezuelans.
Well, and they're not necessarily Venezuelans.
Right. We don't know what they are. That's the
we
whole
don't know
point.
What they are because we don't know who they are.
Right. And a good point made on social media, and I wish I had grabbed it so I could credit it to them. But the whole thing about due process, due process, and I know people in MAGA world, they roll their eyes. Oh, that's what they mean. When they say due process, they're talking about the technicalities that let criminals run free, even if they're arrested. We got to turn them loose because of due process. But it is due process that allows you ordinarily to trust that if the government says the people they're shipping to El Salvador are in fact Venezuelans, are in fact illegally in the country, and are in fact gang members, you can trust that because it's been tested in court. If it's not tested in court, you don't know what the hell's going on. All your certainty about what the government is doing is wrapped up in due process. It's for you. Even if you're not being arrested and don't have any connection whatsoever to the people being arrested, the way you know that they're not just lying to you is the due process rights of the people who are being handled this way.
So let me read you
story.
A very famous quote.
All right.
From F. Scott Fitzgerald from his book, The Great Gatsby.
Mm-hmm. Why was he so great?
Because self-made man,
right?
That Gatsby guy. And besides, Long Island, So you put the two together, and that's great. So they were careless people, Tom and Daisy. Mm-hmm. They smashed up things and creatures and then retreated back in their money or their vast carelessness or whatever it was that kept them together and let other people clean up the mess they had made. And I quote that because of this Steve Vladeck piece that appears in the New York Times today, The Tom and Daisy Presidency.
Okay.
Basically, he says, look, the courts can only do so much when the goal of imposing a policy isn't to win as much as it is to break things and let other people clean up the mess they had made. For all the judicial interventions we've seen in the first 8 weeks, alarmingly little has changed on the ground. Federal money's frozen. Unlawfully fired federal workers are still out of work. Some of them have been hired back. Mahmoud Khalil, a Columbia graduate and green card holder, arrested March 8th on exceptionally tenuous legal grounds, remains in an immigration detention facility in Louisiana. And basically the thesis here is that we may be on the right side of the law, but it doesn't help when something's been broken. And the courts simply don't act fast enough to prevent things from being broken. It's supposed to. You're supposed to enjoin or do penalties or something to make you not do it again, but you can't do that against the president.
That's usually true. They're usually following the law, but
Well, but the Supreme Court said that you can't really do anything about it.
Yeah, you can't, because that too was an underlying assumption. Well, you can't interfere with the president's lawful execution of his duties, although they did say usually lawful execution of his duties.
So in our constitutional system, there is a remedy for this.
Or whatever, yeah.
But unfortunately, it's Congress.
Oh, man.
The obvious long-term lesson is for Congress, which among lots of other things should make it much easier for victims of wrongful federal behavior to obtain judicial redress. But the shorter-term lesson is for we the people. The courts have done a remarkable job of enforcing legal and constitutional limits. In that respect, the courts may well end up saving the rule of law, but to be fully effective, our legal rights depend not just on judicial remedies, but political ones. And that means new legislation, aggressive oversight, all the stuff that would make presidents make it harder for presidents to break things in the future. We have a Republican Congress, and they just have no interest.
Yeah.
And so that's the big problem. And the courts can't address that.
Yeah, that's who's got the power. They're supposed to, jealously guard that prerogative, but so far no go.
Robert Byrd is turning over in his grave.
Yes. Oh my God. I mean, he really could be. Well, how would we know? You have to go and listen, I suppose.
I'll send a 19-year-old to check on him. So this is not necessarily going over well with the public.
Stop turning, they'll say.
Stop turning. G. Elliott Morris was the data journalist at The Economist and ran all of their polling stuff. And then when Nate Silver was fired by ABC, G. Elliott Morris took over 538. And then when ABC closed down 538, G. Elliott Morris now has his own Substack blog called Strength in Numbers. And he'll be there till he figures out what he's going to do next. But today's piece is the Trump vibe shift. Public opinion, especially on the economy, is turning against the president. In other words, it's not just our imagination. It's actually true. It's happening.
Okay.
Which is always nice to know.
Yes. All right. I found, while we were talking, I was just gazing at buttons, and I've pressed a different button to see whether we'll have one more experiment later on. But go on.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, we have a clip you could play with, or maybe just the music.
Well, maybe that. Yeah, we could do that if you're ready to move to that story.
Oh, well, listen, if you could play it, we'll just move right
hell
there.
If I know. I don't know. I clicked the button. Some other things came up. Honestly.
For those of you listening at home, I have to remind you of a couple of things.
All right.
Firstly, all of this chaos about the sound stuff on the show is my fault because I'm the one that pushed us to do Zoom.
Well,
we didn't have to do it till May 1st, but we have to do it on May 1st because Skype is going away. Yes. And I figured it's better to do this with Skype as a backup in case something really goes wrong rather than do it when Skype isn't there anymore. So that's my doing.
Well, yes, it's Skype's doing for chickening out and leaving the country.
Right.
Or whatever.
So I said to David, why don't we just do Zoom this morning? And then the rest followed, including like, how do you turn this thing on?
Okay, we'll do Zoom. What's Zoom? I knew what it was, but I've never used it for this application. All right. Well, I don't know. I pressed some more buttons. You want to play this? You gave me a clip.
Try it.
Well, let's see if you hear it. And I guess how I want to know if people at home are hearing it. I'll assume they're hearing it. Raise your hands at home. And then I don't know if you're hearing it, but this is, you can introduce it, or you want me to just play it and say, you'll figure out what it is.
It's a town meeting, and just go ahead and play it.
All right.
Elon Musk and the Department.
You hearing anything yet? No difference for you, right?
No difference for me.
Okay. Well, I'll help you understand what's going on here. Boo! Boo!
Right. So yet another town meeting where a Republican shows up and says, I support what DOGE is doing. And everybody who is in the audience gets really upset at this guy.
Okay, yes, it's Mike Flood. And he's pretty dweeby looking, by the way. Town hall in Columbus, Nebraska, is that right?
Yeah, I think he was in Nebraska. I mean, the point is it was sort of a really Trumpy place. Yeah. And they were still upset with him.
Okay.
So that's the political side of it. That's just going to take a while to, gather steam and do what it needs to do. But the Republicans are not on strong ground here. Now, when you look at the actual numbers, G. Elliott Morris says there's been a persistent narrative over the past few months that American voters, and especially young people, have shifted rightward due to a desire for conservative policies, especially on spending and anti-democratic sentiment. Polls showing a generational low for the Democratic Party brand have gained a lot of attention, and many commentators are wondering whether young men in particular will ever vote for the left again.
Yeah.
This narrative is wrong.
Oh, okay. Shoo.
Mostly, I think it's all an overreaction to slickly presented but cherry-picked and unrepresentative poll numbers and a failure of the collective pundit class to acknowledge that the trends are nuanced and causality is hard. There's a popular wrong impression that the average American is enthusiastically pro-Trump rather than largely anti-Harris or anti-inflation more generally, and the data tells a different story.
Okay.
And so he has the data. That's what he does.
Well, all right.
And that's why I wanted to present it. So he says, take, for example, the public support for entitlement spending. A poll conducted by AP Norc in February found 62 to 67% of adults thought the U.S. government should be spending more on entitlements, education, and assistance to the poor. And the General Social Survey found support for the federal spending on health care, child care, Social Security, and pretty much everything to be at all-time highs.
I see.
Then there's President Trump's job approval. In my average, a successor methodology to the one published at 538, Trump's approval rating stands at 48 with a disapproval of 48.7. It's hardly a number to cheer about, would not be enough to rescue the party from next year's likely midterm losses. So in other words, the party in the White House usually loses seats in the midterms, and just having approval ratings, this is not 9/11 and George Bush Sky High and so on and so forth. This is something completely different. So this all sets the background for discussing two new polls released this week. They help fill in the picture of public opinion toward Trump the president, distinct from Trump the person or Trump the candidate. First, a YouGov poll shows Americans believe Trump primarily looks out for the wealthy and big corporations. According to YouGov's data, 87% of Americans say Trump cares a lot about the needs and problems of wealthy Americans, and 77% say he cares a lot or some about white Americans, 73% about men, and 72% about Republicans, and obvious tension with the image of Trump, the everyman steward of the multiracial working-class GOP, Trump the populist. He isn't. But it is, of course, in strict keeping with who he has literally and figuratively surrounded himself with. He's handed over much of his reform agenda to the richest man in the world, and his cabinet has the highest net worth of any before it. Trump's policies, too, stand to benefit the wealthy more than the average American. Now, that's problematic for Trump, given Trump's success with working-class voters in 2024. If these voters come to believe Trump isn't actually fighting for them, his support could erode quickly. And I told you the people who didn't vote in 2024 have already soured on him, according to Atlas Intel polling. I think we talked about that yesterday. By 70 points, he's down. And the current economic situation is doing him no favors. The second poll rings the alarm bell. Echelon Insights, and again, that's a Republican poll, reveals rising salience of and significant skepticism about his efforts on the economy. 49% of voters say the country's off on the wrong track. 41% say the economy or cost of living are the most important issue. A lot of these polls are saying immigration is 8. So the fact that Trump gets good marks on immigration doesn't matter.
Yeah, none.
It's like when Democrats get good marks on climate change, and climate change turns out to be a 5% issue, unfortunately.
Yeah. Oh. All right.
I mean, great, but
you're doing
41% said it was the economy, and 5% says it was climate change. So you're leading on climate change. So what?
I got all the extra credit questions right.
Yeah,
failed the rest of the test.
Exactly. Most people say the economy, well put, that's a very good analogy. Most people say the economy is getting worse rather than better, and voters disapprove of how the president is handling the situation by net 2 points. And that's now. I mean, it's going to get worse as the economy gets worse.
All right.
And the echelon poll's not an outlier. CNN found Trump's underwater on the economy by a substantial margin, 44 to 56.
Yes.
That's his highest economic disapproval ever in CNN polling. His high previously was in December 2017 when it was at 49. Now it's 56. So that's pretty interesting. But Elliot, you might say.
Elliot.
Yes. This is just one question, and the deficit seems unimportant. But remember, the economy inflation is the issue that won Trump the White House. AP Votecast data, that's what you look at after the election, confirms that inflation was the most influential issue in the campaign, one Trump had a strong edge on. There were many criticisms of the Biden-Harris campaign, mostly Biden, for ignoring or playing down inflation. It cost them the White House. But Trump, that's me saying that, but Trump didn't win because voters particularly loved him or his economic ideas. Trump won because he wasn't the incumbent.
Yes. Okay.
And as the Financial Times graveyard of incumbents analysis shows, incumbent parties all over the world suffered losses plausibly due to mass economic pressure during the recovery from COVID-19. So what happens when the economy's still not good, housing's still not cheap, and prices are still rising, but this time Trump is in charge? Well, you're watching it and you're witnessing it.
He wrecks stuff.
Right?
That didn't need to be wrecked.
Tom and Daisy are in the White House, and this is what happens. The pattern of economic dissatisfaction leading to incumbent defeats is one of the oldest and most durable findings in academic political science. It's practically a historical constant. It's not unique to Trump. It's not unique to Biden. The shift against Trump on the economy, and again, I have to emphasize, Harris didn't lose. Biden lost. Incumbent lost. You know, it isn't that Harris should have done this or only if she had gone on Joe Rogan. That's stupid stuff. That's not what was going on here. People were unhappy with the situation. They blamed the incumbent. End of story. So the shift against Trump on the economy is important because it's a big move in public opinion, and it's a vibe shift, a change in how both people, but the media also understand opinion about him that preconditions future electoral backlash. Now, that's really important because if you think Trump is popular and if you think his policies are popular, you'll blow off any drop in the stock market on any given day as saying, oh, it's a correction, big deal, so what? If you think Trump is unpopular, if you think his economic performance is unpopular, then a 600-point drop in the Dow is like, look, this fits our narrative of what Trump is in terms of the economy, and big warning signal. Completely different story. Same data.
Yeah, I guess. The data's the same. That's clearly true.
Yeah, but the narrative is different because, you know, of course, we're totally objective, we reporters, and we never let, you know, subjective stuff get in. But, God, everybody knows Trump isn't popular, and look what happened.
Yeah.
So, you know, they and their editors, you know, are at least for those people who follow the news. We talked about this yesterday. If you follow the news, you're aware of all of this, and it's really upsetting. If you're not following the news, you may be a Trump supporter, but, you know, price of eggs, if you can find eggs at all, remains a big deal.
Yeah. And I guess then you slowly, issue by issue, become aware of it, even if you're ignoring the news. Eggs prices are staring you in the face.
Right.
No avoiding it.
So what the data reveals is the continuance of an iron truth, or this is sometimes called the thermostatic response.
Oh.
Like,
all right.
If a Democrat is in the White House, you really favor Republicans in your head because those damn Democrats didn't fix my problem.
Mm-hmm.
And when a Republican is in the White House, same thing. And you could see that thermostatic response by partisan interest when you ask the question, how's the economy doing? Trump's elected, all of a sudden Republicans think the very same economy is fantastic. You know, that kind of thing.
Right.
What the data reveals, G. Elliott Morris writes, is the continuance of an iron truth about American politics. Voters might reject one party's handling of the economy, but they don't automatically transfer their trust to the opposition. They maintain healthy skepticism of both parties' economic competence. Trump's political future may depend less on his opponent's weakness and more on his ability to actually deliver. Understanding the reasons for Trump victory is key to understanding why he's vulnerable in the future. He's vulnerable in the future because he's the incumbent. Too long, didn't read. That's a story.
Yeah.
Okay. And the other thing that, this brings to mind is the observation we had earlier about the Congress and the Republican Congress in particular not doing anything.
Yeah.
No, do nothing, know nothing Congress. Americans really like it when you have one party in the White House and another party running Congress. Now you see why.
That's said to be the case. Yeah,
but
I don't know.
This is reinforcing that, that's a good idea.
Yeah, maybe. I mean,
because without it, we're getting this. We're getting people being picked, American citizens being picked off the street by hooded thugs and being sent who knows where for whatever reason.
Wait a minute. I thought we were getting rid of the thugs. No.
Well, are they thugs?
Maybe.
I don't know. Due process. We don't know.
Right. But we're using our own thugs to get rid of those thugs. Or they might be our thugs. I don't know. They're wearing hoods. Who knows?
Anyway, break time coming up. It's 9:27.
Right.
And the temperature in Connecticut is 42. Yet. And, if this were like a regular radio station, we'd be telling you this stuff. Traffic's okay this morning.
Yeah, because we're not in it.
And Abby's been fit, so, we're in good shape.
Right. So good news there. Any bears?
Not today.
Report? Okay.
Not today, but I have bluebirds at my feeder, which I was really happy about.
Okay. And now our music begins. The dum-dum begins. Everyone at home heard it. I need to tell you in your home in Connecticut that you would be hearing it if you were listening to the stream. But then you would really have a hard time doing the show.
Right.
What did I just say? Yeah. 15 seconds later, you'd be hearing yourself. Oh my gosh, that would be pretty distracting. All right. Well, I have a reliable report that the audio from the clip that we played did stream, so everybody at home heard the booing. They didn't think we were crazy.
Oh, that's wonderful, because that's what I wanted.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, and we're going to start having town halls and have people boo at us. I feel like I'm being left out of the action. They're being booed everywhere. I think I saw this morning, in addition to the one we just watched from Nebraska, a similar booing situation in Wyoming, super liberal Wyoming, where the Republican who has taken Liz Cheney's seat had a similar experience in trying to convince the town hall audience that, don't worry, Social Security is totally safe. No one's trying to cut it at all anywhere except for firing all the people who work there. Boo, boo. They're not having it either in Wyoming, in Nebraska, nowhere.
You can't cut people's services and then try to gaslight them into saying that their services aren't cut. They know.
They'll notice when the check doesn't show up or people aren't answering the phone.
Right. And so, listen, this is how things work on the show. Republican Congress people get booed at town halls.
Boo.
You wind up not being able to get a sufficient second. Or maybe I'll reclaim my time. But, that's how it works here.
It could be that I'm getting
We're very process-oriented.
But if the second comes over my soundboard, they'll hear it at home and you won't. You'll think I have no sufficient second. People at home will know.
Now these terms, which I don't really understand, are things that I have learned doing the show with David. So, they're important to use every once in a while so that they don't disappear. You got to practice them.
Sure. Silkro.
Yeah, or inviting cloture, as Armando likes to do.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. All right.
So this is, we're doing polling. We're talking about G. Elliott Morris. Fox News poll, new Fox News poll. Voters have concerns about DOGE, even as they see need for cuts. Inflation and the economy remain top issues for voters. So inflation, the economy. A slim 51% majority opposes substantially shrinking the number of government employees. 56% disapprove of the job the Trump administration is doing. Identifying and reducing wasteful spending, and another 65% worry that not enough thought and planning has gone into the cuts. Now remember, this is a Fox News write-up. The data's good, but how they write it up is Fox. So they could have put that 65% number first.
Yeah.
What they put first is that most think the national debt is a crisis or major problem.
Well, they're wrong.
And nearly 6 and 10% feel a great deal or almost all the government spending is wasteful and inefficient, except for the stuff that I get.
Yeah.
They didn't add that. And it's like,
it's pretty efficient.
Do you understand what the national debt is? Explain it to me. I mean, some of these numbers just have no purpose or function, but they fit Fox's narrative, and so they get put first. The important one is that people understand that not enough thought and planning has gone into these cuts, and 56% disapprove of what he's doing. Those are the big numbers. Not that, most people think that you should cut wasteful stuff. Yes, most people think you should send criminals back to where they came from. The problem is, without due process, you don't know that they're criminals.
That's
and
right.
You even don't know where they came from since you're deporting American citizens.
Right. Well, we've boiled it down here before. The shorthand we use for it, of course, why don't you just isms, right? Why don't you just throw out all the criminals? Well, the answer is due process. How do you know who's a criminal? Where do they belong? If they belong anywhere. Maybe they're our own criminals now, and we should deal with them. Why
you call it due process. I call it rule of law.
Yeah.
We'll split the difference. The fact of the matter is this is a lawless, non-due process situation, and that's not good.
Right.
93% of Democrats disapprove of Musk, 70% of independents, and 20% of Republicans, 58% overall.
I got to believe that number even among Republicans is going up. He'll be a convenient scapegoat. If they can't stomach blaming Trump, they'll just blame Musk.
When asked about funding for specific federal programs, not whether or not the government spends too much, but specific programs, which one should you cut, right? Majorities think the government should increase funding for Social Security, 63%, Medicare and Medicaid, 58%, medical research, 53%, funding the military and national defense, 44%. Of course, Republicans are electing to increase defense and decrease everything else.
Right. Sure. I mean, I guess they'll get that. You got to increase defense if you're going to invade Canada, Panama, Mexico, Greenland, and Gaza. So.
Now, overall, this is where you can look at the future. This is where polling tells you where we're going. Overall, 1 in 4 voters says somebody in their family has been significantly affected by government cuts.
Yeah.
That's a substantial number of voters, but the important thing is of that 25%, 79% of the 25% are concerned about how the cuts have been handled. So as the number of people who this affects grows, you can assume properly, I think appropriately and correctly, that how the cuts have been handled is going to be a growing problem for the Republicans. Voters also have doubts about tariffs. Guess what? When the tariffs hit, as they're going to do on April 2nd, majorities think the measures will make products that they buy more expensive. 69% hurt the economy, 53%. They're not sure about jobs and how that affects jobs. That's okay. That's a complicated situation. You, as a regular person answering a poll, don't need to be an expert on how this is going to affect jobs.
Yeah.
What you need to know is how it's going to affect the price of eggs.
That's what you'd like to know. Yes.
And it's going to make it more expensive, and people know that.
Oh, no. What? Yeah.
On the overall economy, a growing number of voters think it's in bad shape. Many think inflation's out of control, and most believe a recession is at least somewhat likely. Well. And so Fox News paints this as people see they need cuts. Well, that's not really what the numbers say. That's just what Fox says. The numbers say if you give them a specific program, they don't want to cut it.
Yeah. Most of them. I mean, if you make up a dumb-sounding program, they usually want to cut that one. Well, what about federal government spending on testing, whether or not monkeys prefer Rice Krispies or Fruit Loops? Oh, eliminate that.
Oh, wait. That's an interesting one.
Yeah. You might want to. Yeah. Hold on a second.
Not so we might not want to cut that one.
Yeah. There will be people, of course. Sometimes those things are made up. Sometimes they're just spun as ridiculously as possible. And of course, sometimes, look, you're not a scientist. You don't understand why they're doing that. But if you have a minute and we can explain to you, yeah, they're looking to see if, XYZ sort of reaction happens. And they believe that for whatever reason, the things that are beyond you but might be apparent to a genetic scientist, and there are such things. What if it was a cure for cancer? Well, then if I get cancer, start the program again. If I don't, cut it.
Or somebody in my family gets cancer.
Right.
Or somebody I know gets cancer. Now all of a sudden we've expanded the universe of people who can get cancer.
That's true too. But keep in mind for the why don't you just out there, right? If you get cancer, it's too late to restart the program. By the time we get to the cure again, you've lost your fight. More than
so this is a new, different poll, and the last one I'm going to do. This is YouGov for today anyway. YouGov America. Do you favor the U.S. increasing, maintaining, or decreasing, or stopping all military aid to Ukraine? Increase, maintain, decrease, or stop.
Okay.
Increase 28, maintain 25.
All right.
That's a majority, by the way.
Right.
More than half. Decrease 14, stop 19. So you basically have the same 35% of idiots that you will always have on any question at any given time in American history. That's fine.
Plus, we have 19% of our country is Russian, I guess. All right.
With Democrats, it's increase 55, maintain 23, decrease 4, and stop 5. So 9% of Democrats are always idiots, always. Unfortunately for the GOP, increase 8, maintain 21. Decrease 22 and stop 32.
Wow.
So half of the GOP is insane. So we knew that. But point being that actual support for Ukraine is relatively popular.
I guess that's something.
Now, this is what I found to be a really interesting piece because of where it is. It's from the Gazette. That's the Denver Gazette, otherwise known as the Colorado Springs Denver Gazette, point being very conservative area.
Okay.
Colorado may be a purple-blue state, but Colorado Springs is pretty conservative.
I see.
Religious organizations out there, military stuff out there, it's just a conservative area. So this is a guest opinion piece written by a feller named Pete Jacobs.
Pete Jacobs.
A feller, a guy.
Yeah, all right.
Not Bob Feller, who pitches for the Cleveland Indians, but, a feller. How easily we forget previous struggles, he writes. Here's a view from my side of the fence. I write these words as a lifelong conservative American who loves this country and is concerned about where it's headed.
Oh, dear.
Ranching and farming, and he's a rancher and farmer, he's a cattle guy.
Great.
Endure their fair share of challenges from Mother Nature, as well as high operating costs related to fuel, fertilizer, seed, land, and water. Regardless of the size of the operation, it's a labor of love. It's a way of life. I rise before dawn to check the watering holes, work all day mending fences, checking on the cattle. After a long day, I have supper. I feed Lassie. I come back into town.
Right. Wow, he has supper. That's amazing.
And I stay past midnight to attend meetings at the local school. During hay season, the pace is relentless. Sun up to sundown, irrigating, cutting, baling, and stacking hay, often late into the night. Did we not learn from what happened during President Trump's first term? Have we forgotten how his trade policies negatively infected the grain and cattle markets? And as if that wasn't enough, we were further hit by COVID-19. All of that was a contributing factor to inflation. How easily we forget the struggles we endured. During that time, corn and soybean were at full capacity. The farmers were forced to dump grain in huge piles on the ground, nowhere for it to go. Ranchers taking their calves to the sale barn is not only a monetary venture, but a social one. The grandstands surrounding the sale ring area are filled like a Friday night football game, buyers and sellers. Amid the auctioneer's rapid-fire call to secure the highest bids for the sellers, the air buzzes with chatter as old friends reconnect, sharing stories about the last time they met, yada yada. However, shortly after the tariffs were enacted, the grandstands were empty. It was a scene dominated only by buyers. The sale ring now featured cows and bulls instead of calves. The seed stock, painstakingly developed over generations, being sold off due to farm and ranch foreclosures. This is what happened under Trump, he says. How can you not forget this stuff? Taking into account the global economy, he writes, the U.S. has been at the forefront, even with higher prices resulting from the trade policies put in place by Trump's first go-around between China and the U.S. We cannot overlook the significant role China's played in our past economic success. Whether we like it or not, we have benefit from lower prices in everyday goods at retailers such as Walmart and Target. Additionally, we shouldn't forget about Mexico, which supplies our off-season produce as well as the beer and tequila that many of us enjoy, especially me, he should add. And then there's Canada, our closest ally. Canada plays several important roles in the U.S. across various domains, including economic, political, environmental, and cultural aspects. Pete Jacobs is a Red Angus breeder in Colorado.
Okay. Sorry about that, farms.
So the farmers are noticing is my point, and that's his base.
Aren't our farmers great? They love me.
They are great, and they don't love you.
Oh.
So,
again, this stuff. Money. What about money? Did they like it?
That's the thing. That's how he won them the first time. They were really upset. Everybody forgets this.
Yeah, Pete cashed the check.
Nobody knew this except me. No, I'm sorry. I'm not Donald Trump. But the farmers are really upset, so he sent them a ton of money.
Very few people know
He subsidized his tariffs last time, and that's how he got away with it with the farmers.
Yeah, it was and it was specifically connected, too. I don't know why.
No, it was a blatant bribe.
Yeah. Well, I'm just wondering. It occurs to me that
he should have been impeached for it, except he was already impeached twice for other things.
Well, all right. So they figured it was all wrapped up in one. We definitely did under impeach this guy. That's for sure. We definitely ignored things. Well, look, we've got him up on like 6 charges the second time here. So there's really no point in adding the other charges. Let's have it be narrowly focused. You remember all that argument too. But the relief to farmers last time, it was interesting because it was specifically tied. I mean, it was tied in the newspaper, and people don't read the newspaper, but it was specifically tied. This is this is relief for the effect of tariffs
on China specifically.
Right. And what people heard was, here's money. And so they never, it's interesting that they should come back around and say, well, we're going to make this country great again with more tariffs. And I do notice that he doesn't say
that
like
more
we did
bribes,
last
more
time.
Subsidies.
Yeah. Right. Now that
more,
may be what
more
the
government
upshot
spending,
is.
which people want cut.
That might be the upshot of it. But yeah, what nobody remembered was last time he said that he was going to do tariffs and make the country great again. We got money. That's what I remember. But the reason we got money was because it was supposed to be making up for all the money we were losing from the tariffs. And he was going to make us.
That's why that report from that farmer from Colorado was just so interesting.
Yes.
I remember. Have people not remembered? Have they forgotten? This is what happened last time.
Yeah.
These are not good ideas.
Well, Pete the farmer remembers. Athena 5000, one of our frequent listeners, chiming in that Colorado Springs is a big military area as well. And isn't that the Air Force Academy is there?
Yeah. Right? Yeah, I mentioned. Military. It's very conservative.
Yeah. So military and cows, these two mainstays of the area. We could invade just mounted on cattle instead of so we have all right, so cattle ranchers, conservative group, military conservative group, military cattle ranchers, forget about it, but we I don't know. One guy notices. Can he get his neighbors to notice?
Well, he wrote an article in the paper, and then hopefully
he'll talk to people at the auctions, I guess.
Exactly.
That's what he says.
That's when you talk to your neighbors and say, "Did you see my op-ed in the Denver Gazette?" That's exactly when it happens.
Boy, did we see it, Pete.
It's a Colorado water cooler.
In for some real trouble with your cattle. All of a sudden, things could happen. Right. Yeah. Well, don't leave the country.
Well,
Pete.
Nice cattle. Too bad if something happened to it.
Right. This guy, Pete, this is a Venezuelan gang ranch.
Speaking of Venezuelan gangs, let me just shift gears here. I have this one small piece by Isaac Saul. And he writes, the waters have been sufficiently muddied by people selling snake oil about the Alien Enemies Act and these deportations to El Salvador. So let me give you a few important clarifying points.
Okay.
One. We don't know who got deported. We literally don't have their names. We don't have their allegations against them.
We're getting
no evidence has been presented. We know close to nothing about them, except the administration's claims they were here illegally and they are gang members. The reason that the administration has told people they think they're gang members is because of their tattoos.
Yes, though we are finding out
bizarre
that some of them are gang members.
That's why Pete Hegseth is going to be deported next.
No
court cases have happened. That's right. No court cases have happened. There was no trial or hearing or evidence. Some Venezuelans legally seeking asylum have claimed their family members were deported despite having no affiliation with the Tren de Agua gang or despite having scheduled court appearances for their asylum cases.
Right.
Obviously, if we deported Venezuelans legally seeking asylum to one of the harshest prisons in the world, in El Salvador, without any due process, that'd be bad.
Well, it is bad because we did it.
Yeah. 3, ICE officials have said in sworn testimony in court that some of the deportees have not been accused of any crimes. They also said they determined they were members of TDA, that's the gang, through investigative methods like financial transactions or victim testimonies, but they don't have any evidence that they've presented.
Financial transactions. We had financial transactions dead to rights on Matt Gaetz. He walked.
Yeah. 4, the Alien Enemies Act has been declared just 3 times ever. The War of 1812, World War I, and World War II.
Yeah.
In each of these cases, Congress declared war, which is constitutionally their power alone and not the president's. A reminder.
But maybe it isn't.
People forget this because Congress has let the president do limited actions, but only Congress can declare war.
Or me, I was told.
The AEA, Alien Act there, is triggered whenever there's a declared war between the U.S. and any foreign nation. No declared war here, but also the TDA gang isn't a foreign nation or government.
Right.
So it's not just that Trump needs Congress to declare war. He needs them to declare war against Venezuela.
Yeah. By the way, even in the global war on terror, that sort of quasi-war, and we're at war with Al-Qaeda, and they still weren't just generally grabbing Arabs off the street and sending them anywhere in particular, much less El Salvador. But this time, yes.
So all of the above are just basic facts of the story. Trump's going to lose in court. His administration will almost certainly comply. No judges are going to be impeached for following the law, despite the theater. And by the way, it takes 2/3 in the Senate to convict and remove a judge anyway. Judge Boasberg is another well-respected member of the judiciary who, by the way, I don't know if you saw Garrett Haake correct the Caroline Levitt spokesperson garbage. Levitt said,
yes,
Boasberg is just another Democratic activist judge appointed by Barack Obama. And Garrett Haake said, well, actually, he was appointed by Bush.
Yeah, well, actually. Yeah, and for those who like to trace the grain of truth to see, where do they get that from? Sometimes they're just making it up, but he was appointed to the federal bench first to the district court by George W. Bush, Republican. Yep. You may remember the guy as a Republican. Not many people know that he was a Republican. I'm just pointing that out. And
many people admit it today.
Elevated to higher, I guess, was he moved to the? He's not an appeals
He's a circuit judge
clerk,
now,
is
right?
he? Is he? I don't know. I guess he might be. But yeah, I guess there's some confusion. So sometimes people are appointed by a Republican to the federal bench for the first time and then elevated to the next higher up court by the next president because they've actually done a good job being a judge. I've also seen I can share with people later on a rundown of exactly what has this judge been up to over the past couple of years and the number of times in which he's upheld Trump administration positions for them.
5 or 6 or 7 times.
Several times. He's a very middle of the road judge. And when it came time to, to gain notice and be appointed to the judiciary, it was by Republicans. So
the mantra, as I understand it,
waste no more time on that.
And this applies to Tanya Chutkan too, and any other judge who has to rule on stuff, like DOGE, is that judges rule on the law and the facts before them in the case.
It's very
and therefore,
stupid.
They might do one thing on one case and they might do something else on another case.
Yeah, even if they're
because
similar.
the facts are different.
Right.
The law might even be different. Might be a different law, that is.
You need to be able to. Well, sometimes when the law is the same, the facts are different. And they say these are distinguishing facts. The fact pattern here is just different for whatever reason. That's all frequently made argument. It's standard stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't get too upset when a judge rules like the way I don't want, because, there may have been other.
Yeah, well, you're supposed to have that. That's another part of due process. This came out wrong, I think. All right, well, if you think it's provable, there's a whole system for it. Whereas Trump says, well, one, we're going to get rid of appeals for the middle courts, and we're going to go straight to the Supreme Court.
Like pardons, for example. Nobody can appeal a presidential pardon. I like that. Let's do that everywhere.
Right. We'll just preempt the system. By the way, another entry in that category. We reported the other day, we saw the story of Enrique Tarrio getting himself arrested in D.C. again, slapping somebody's camera out of their hands, charged with assault. As it happens, Ed Martin, he doesn't use the word acting, but what does he say? I don't know.
Acting, he's the acting out district attorney for
the U.S. U.S. attorney for D.C. And he's dropped the charges, essentially. He's just said, he got arrested, he was charged, but we're not prosecuting it. Enrique Tarrio can punch whoever he wants. That's a bad sign. At least in D.C. Yeah, right. Now, there may be details where they say, well, we just didn't think the case was going to hold up. It wasn't a particularly egregious assault. That's all, maybe the window dressing on it. But at the moment, the message that Enrique Tarrio has got is, I can punch anybody. So if I get in an argument with you in D.C. or wherever there's a Trumpy U.S. attorney, I might punch your teeth in at any point because I know I'm going to walk. You can't punch my teeth in because you'll get charged. And that's exactly what he's hoping people will understand about him. So they won't argue with him because they'll be afraid of him. So, whatever. I'm just telling you, he thinks he's immune from prosecution, and that's pretty dangerous.
Right.
Okay, I didn't mean to upset you.
I'm over it.
You're over it now? All right. Well, we'll make sure the guy never comes to Connecticut.
Okay.
All right. Got a minute or two for more things if anything else has happened.
Well, I got a really long one that I'm not going to do.
Oh, okay. You can give it to me.
But, you may know Derek Thompson and Ezra Klein wrote a book about abundance, and basically how NIMBYs and other Democrats have to make places like California and New York run properly. That's why people vote for Trump. They don't like Trump, but you can't point to California and New York and say, here's the utopia that happens when Democrats run everything. So Democrats have to be better at running everything. That's their basic thesis. And it's really interesting. There's a lot of interesting stuff in it. And I'll give it to you, and you can do it today or tomorrow.
All right.
And there's two pieces. That go with that. One is they had a interview in the Atlantic, which is accessible.
That's good news.
So, in fact, I'll give you a gift link to make sure it's accessible.
Thank
Having
you.
said that, I better make sure that I'm delivering what I said I was going to do.
Yeah.
Right? And then the second one
like the Democrats.
is in a journal called National Affairs about something called minoritarianism.
I love National Affairs.
Is, right?
Yes, I do.
When the majority runs stuff, that's a majoritarian institution, for example, is the House of Representatives.
Yeah, majority.
Where the
majority rules, man.
Yeah, but what if the minority rules? That's a problem if it blocks anything from getting done.
Yeah.
And that's part of their whole thesis about what Democrats have to deal with. You have to guard against minoritarianism or NIMBY blocking everything because it makes regular normie people unhappy. However, let me just throw in, sometimes you need those local regulations. We're talking about building commercial structures here where I live in this small town. And if a big operation, a large housing for the wealthy, or some commercial project comes in and basically steals all the water from resident wells, that's not good. What stops that? Local regulations.
Right.
So local regulations aren't always bad. Red tape isn't always bad. You got to balance these things. I'll drop all of that in your lap and you can sort it out.
Well, yeah, that's a project.
It's really interesting.
Yeah. Well, it is, as usual, things come down to a spin and what sort of spin you put on it, right? All the water in everybody's well in the neighborhood is gone. That seems bad. But on the other hand, somebody else says, but I'm building a commercial enterprise.
And I'm building your tax base. Your taxes will go down.
Right, sure. And
buy water at the store.
Right. I'm creating jobs. No one can drink anything at this job. But that, and of course, we've been over this ground too, right? Creating jobs. Yes, I know. I understand you're creating jobs. But remember, we know simple economics. You're creating the smallest number of jobs possible in order for you to make the thing you're talking about. Right. You're not trying to create extra jobs.
Anyway, 9:58 now, right?
Yeah, so that's right. So that means the music is about 20 seconds away. So don't worry, they're not happening yet. I mean, I guess I give you a countdown and then hum the tune for you. But
we'll get this fixed, folks. But it's just fun. It's fun.
All right.
And these are interesting and important topics because it's taking up a lot of space in Democratic circles talking about this book and this concept.
Yes, and now they can talk about it over the music. So now you got about 30 seconds or less to say one more thing and take off for the week. But I can say
I'm just trying to make the point that sometimes local regulations are important, and sometimes they're ridiculous, and so you got to decide.
You got to strike that balance. Yep. And you got to understand that the other guys are going to attempt everything they can to make
everybody
it look
else
like
wants to be Robert Moses. That's not necessarily good.
Right. Moses, good. Robert Moses, no. As a matter of fact, we are back. Welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And I think even if you leave right in the middle at this point, it makes no difference sound-wise. So you can sneak in and sneak out. If we were to chat all the way through the 1 minute break, let's say, just as a hypothetical, and then come back into the show and Greg was like, crap, I missed my exit, it wouldn't matter. He could just walk, I think, and it makes no difference. Or he could just chime in and say something. What ends up happening when he leaves is a thing pops up in the screen that says the host has ended the meeting. Makes no difference to me. It just happened right in front of all of you. Well, I saw it. You didn't because it's not a visual medium. Made no sound, right? Now, if it had said, some clown is leaving the meeting, then that would be embarrassing and you wouldn't want that to happen. But it didn't. Easy. Jump scare entrance, as Scott put it, right? There's no warning sound that the next voice you may hear might be Greg's. And this is good cover. You can walk out right in the middle. And as a matter of fact, if something happens, I guess you could walk out right in the middle of the discussion and turn it all off and then turn it back on later if you needed to. I think it can all be done silently. All right. I guess that's an improvement over Skype. Anyway, so as I mentioned along the way, in the due process discussion, and one of the problems with just simply getting around due process, I guess there's an analogy to be made there, too, to what we were just talking about a moment ago. Local regulations. It's all bureaucratic red tape. It's getting in the way of me opening a factory or building a giant hotel. And don't you know you're killing jobs in this country? Versus people who say, I have no water for my house anymore. And there's 15, 20, 1,000 of us have no water. Or we have water, but it's poisoned now because you are dumping your garbage into the reservoir or something like that. Right? And so it's a matter of perspective. And why do you have these stupid regulations that say I can't dump poison in the water? Of course I can't dump poison in the water. Everybody knows that. All right, if we get rid of the regulation, can we count on you to not dump poison? No, then it's not illegal. What the hell? I'm doing it. I'm dumping my poison. I understand it might be immoral, but it's not illegal. All right. Not so great. Now we want those local regulations. By the same token, all of this stupid bureaucratic red tape and loopholes, legal loopholes, are letting criminals stay in our country. We arrest them. They come into our country illegally. They're murderers and rapists and drug dealers, and we arrest them, and then we got to let them right back out. Why don't we? What if we could just chop them up into little pieces? Well, hold on a minute. Hold on. People are not going to go along with it. All right. Big pieces? No, it's the chopping up. All right. Well, then what about if we let the Salvadorans chop them up into little pieces? We will never know. Right. No, that's one of the problems. But what about these stupid regulations or due process that let people be, vindicate their rights and not be accidentally swept up and sent to a third country that they have no connection to, right? It's the same sort of thing. If you want to do these things right and strike that balance, there has to be a process. If you go around the process because you hate red tape, you end up doing stuff like reading from the Blue Sky postings of Aaron, is it Reichlin, R-E-I-C-H-L-I-N, Reichlin Melnick. I'm sorry if it's Reichlin or Reichlin or I don't know, Aaron, but we could. And you've likely seen him on Blue Sky. He's got lots of followers. Senior fellow at the moment at the American Immigration Council, so he's privy to this sort of news. He shares with us on Blue Sky. Sworn declarations filed last night confirm that the Trump administration sent innocent people to rot in prison in El Salvador. Rot in prison in El Salvador. Sounds so good when I say it, but when liberals say it, they make it sound bad, like innocent people are rotting in prison in El Salvador. I don't care that the prison's in El Salvador. Just so long as innocent people rot, that makes me happy. Sir, guilty people, you want them to rot. Oh, you're right. Well, nobody's innocent, especially not if you speak Spanish. What are you doing in this country if you're speaking Spanish, if not being non-innocent? I don't know where you're coming from, sir. But anyway, sworn declarations filed last night confirm that there are innocent people sent to El Salvador, including, I mentioned it in passing, but now here's the proof, a professional soccer player. And that's bad because everyone loves soccer. But also he's innocent. Professional soccer player jailed and tortured previously by the Maduro regime in Venezuela. Gotta leave, right? I've been jailed. I'm tortured. This sucks. I want to get out of here. Where's the freedom? USA. It's actually right in tune with everybody. Even the MAGA people will agree with him. Freedom is here in the United States. Now, the MAGA people say, yes, we have freedom for political dissidents in this country, or people who are political dissidents in their country who are being jailed and tortured without due process. You can come to this country and live freely, but not you. We were talking about white people, not brown people. And that's the downside of it. So, again, I still haven't gotten through his one stupid post here. It's stupid for me not to be able to get through it. The declarations prove that there are innocent people like this guy, a professional soccer player who had been jailed and tortured in the Maduro regime and who entered this country, the United States of America, legally. How, though? Right. You and I know it's legal to come to this country and seek political asylum. The Trump MAGA mindset is, no, it isn't. Yes, he entered the country legally. They don't care. He came to seek asylum. He's got no criminal record. Not here, not even in Venezuela, where he had been jailed and tortured. They still didn't bother even giving this guy a criminal record, apparently, which is really astonishing. They're torturing people who they don't even bother to declare criminals, apparently. So what's going on here? This is I guess, screenshots of the declaration filed in court. Now, I guess I should point out, from a legal procedure standpoint here, yes, this is a sworn declaration. The guy is filing it on penalty of perjury. But I guess people would say, well, that's what he says. That's your story. We say it's very different. And as Aaron points out, he's responding to one of his own posts earlier, Marco Rubio's position in all of this is that we get to say who's a terrorist. Our decision is final. It can't be challenged. Just trust us. Once we decide you are a terrorist, we can immediately deport you. No judge is necessary. After we deport you, we can make you rot in a foreign prison. No criminal charges needed either. What's the result of this? Here is the declaration of one Lynette Tobin. I, Lynette Tobin, do hereby declare the following under penalty of perjury. 1, I am the immigration attorney for Jerce Reyes Barrios. It's Jerce, which I'm imagining in Spanish is Jerce. Jerce Reyes Barrios, born January 16th, 1989, in Venezuela. Youngish guy. In February and March of 2024, Mr. Reyes Barrios marched in 2 demonstrations in Venezuela protesting the authoritarian rule of Maduro, which, by the way, I was given to understand the Trump administration and Trump and his circles agreed with. Yeah, we hate the authoritarian rule of Maduro in Venezuela. So Mr. Reyes Barrios, also not enamored of it, marched in protest of it. At the second demonstration, he was detained and taken to a clandestine building where he was tortured. Electric shocks and suffocation are specified here, along with other demonstrators. By the way, where's the support from the Trump administration? Oh, you're getting to that. Shortly after his release, he fled Venezuela for the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't stand here and listen to you badmouth the United States of America. Gentlemen, right, we'll walk out, we'll hum the national anthem. He registered with CBP One, that's the immigration app, while he was in Mexico. Remember, remain in Mexico. All right, I will. Apply before you get in here. Use our simple app. All right, I will. He then presented himself to CBP officials on the day of his appointment. I registered. It gave me an appointment. I showed up. I did all the things you asked me to do. Apply for asylum, remain in Mexico, use the app, apply for an appointment, attend your appointment. He was then taken into custody and detained at Otay Mesa Detention Facility in September of 2024. We applied for asylum, says his lawyer, withholding of removal, and CAT, C-A-T, protection. I don't know what CAT stands for, but maybe the A in there is asylum. I don't know. CAT protection in December of 2024. His final individual hearing is set for April 17th, 2025, before Judge Robinson at the Otay Mesa Immigration Court, which would be easier to attend if you were in Otay Mesa rather than El Salvador. Number 5, on March 15th, 2025, Mr. Reyes Barrios was deported to El Salvador, from which he does not come, with no notice to counsel or family. And it was not until March 18th, 2025, that counsel was able to reach an ICE official and learn that he had, in fact, been deported. Now, he's in a detention center. He's got an appointment with a judge in April. He's agreed, despite the terrible conditions there, to cool his heels. He's agreed, like he's got any choice. But he's like, all right, I'll wait here, cool my heels until April, and make my case before a judge and see if a fair-minded judge thinks that somebody who was imprisoned for protesting the Maduro regime and fled here seeking political asylum should get political asylum and be released. But instead, this is interesting, right? They make it sound like the gang members, we rounded up gang members. Remember that the whole selling point of this is supposed to be we rounded up people off the street. Even most Democrats would agree that if there were criminal gang members roaming the neighborhood, we would want the government to come in, sweep them up, and get them out of there, whether they put them in jail in the United States or elsewhere. I mean, they might even find people saying, sure, imprison them in El Salvador. There's no real reason for agreeing to do that. That's a separate question, but put them in jail somewhere, right? And so I therefore support this whole thing, even if we have to jail them in El Salvador. I heard they were extra tough on these guys. Well, these are criminals and they only understand one thing and da-da-da-da-da. Well, as it turns out, to make it look like they were deporting a significant number of gang members, first they lied about who's a gang member and what a gang even is. And then second, they didn't round anybody up off the street. They took somebody who was already in detention elsewhere, awaiting their asylum hearing, and sent him out as if they had, snatched him off the streets during an armed robbery in Chicago or something. Chicago, crime town. That's what Republicans think about Chicago. You name it, wherever it might be, or small town in the Midwest, and he was tying a young maiden to the railroad tracks, something more traditional. Nope, they didn't stop him in the middle of the crime. They didn't find his name in a database and go hunting for him and send federal marshals and bounty hunters after him. He was already sitting in a jail cell. And then they scooped him out of there and said, we're telling everybody we snatched you off the street. We're sending you to El Salvador. What else happened with this poor guy? So there he was. He was deported to El Salvador on the 15th of this month. It wasn't until the 18th, 3 days later, that we were able to figure out where he was or find out. Oh, well, all they found out was that he had been deported. I don't think they knew where he was 3 days later. Now, as it happens, right, as might make it more sympathetic for you, in addition to his not being a criminal, he was actually gainfully employed. He was a professional soccer player when he was in Venezuela. So he's got some skills, right? He could be a professional soccer player here, or just work in a regular capacity. He's able-bodied. He's never been arrested and charged with a crime, except for the time he was scooped up off the street in Venezuela, I guess. He has a steady employment record as a soccer player, as well as a soccer coach for children and youth. Something else you could do here. I heard there's some kids in this country interested in playing soccer. Initially, Mr. Reyes Barrios was placed in a maximum security facility, the Otay Mesa security facility, and accused of being a Tren de Aragua gang member. This accusation is based on two things. First, he has a tattoo on his arm. That's right. Now, he has a tattoo on his arm of a crown sitting atop a soccer ball with a rosary, because those are illegal, and the word Dios, God. And we love arresting people who are Christians in this country, as you know. Remember, Christians are the most persecuted people white American Christians are the most persecuted people in this country, except for the other people that we persecute. Anyway, DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, alleges that this tattoo is proof of gang membership. He's a member in the 11-strong soccer gang that everybody is so worried about. A lot of times, these guys will come up to you on the street, and then if you try to take their soccer ball from them, they'll go right around you, and you'll fall on your ass. So, that's terrible. We got to stop this. Anyway, in reality, he chose this tattoo because it is similar to the logo of his favorite soccer team, which interestingly is not the one he plays for, Real Madrid, internationally a very famous and big international soccer power. Didn't get a tattoo of the team he was playing for, but that can change at any time, so maybe it's unwise to get the tattoo unless you're just going to get a series of tattoos for all the teams you join, and that might be something you want to do. Anyway, he likes Real Madrid. He got a similar looking tattoo on his arm. And so what is the question that you might pose about that? DHS is using it. It's a tattoo, therefore gang member. Second, DHS reviewed his social media posts and found a photo of Mr. Reyes Barrios making a hand gesture that they allege is proof of gang membership. Another one of the favorites of the MAGA types. People are making hand gestures. They must mean it's a gang sign, even though in every photo, there's hand signs being made all over the place by MAGA people. But they're like, oh, but that just shows that they're into MAGA. Yeah, they're in a MAGA gang. No, not a gang, just a group of people, some of whom might be dedicated to a life of crime and getting pardoned for them, but whatever. In fact, the gesture is a common one that means I love you in sign language, and we can't have that, and is commonly used as a rock and roll symbol. So yeah, you're talking about here the index finger and pinky and thumb all raised, and the middle and fourth fingers, ring fingers, down. Basically, it's, like a default hand sign for people who don't have any hand signs to make. It's just a thing you pose with. There it is. The picture of him doing that is there. There's a little bit more to this declaration. After submitting a police clearance from Venezuela indicating no criminal record, multiple employment letters, a declaration from the tattoo artist who rendered the tattoo. They tracked that guy down. And various online images showing similar soccer ball and crown tattoos and explaining the meaning of the hand gesture, Mr. Reyes Barros was transferred out of maximum security. So a judge listened and said, yeah, this is kind of dumb, but we got to leave him in less than maximum security because we're not ready to release him yet. Nevertheless, on March 10th or 11th, can't even be sure, he was transferred from Otay Mesa to Texas without notice. And then on March 15th, he was deported to El Salvador. Counsel and family have lost all contact with him and have no information regarding his whereabouts or condition. Instead, he's now, if he's like these other guys, which there's every reason to believe is the case, he's had his head shaved and is walking around in shackles in a pair of underwear and being kept in a Salvadoran prison because reasons. So there you go. The story I mentioned yesterday, still getting lots and lots and lots of play online. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It might make a Friday endeavor to read it. Again, from The Guardian. I'm the Canadian who was detained by ICE for 2 weeks. It felt like I had been kidnapped. I skimmed the story. I read a good portion of the first 3/4 of it and had to kind of ran out of time and skimmed it. She's apparently spent some time passing through this Otay Mesa facility as well. So describing it from the inside sounds pretty horrific. A significant portion of the story is given over to her acknowledging her privilege here. White Canadian woman, English speaker, etc., spent considerably less time in ICE detention than most of the people she encountered there, who have the misfortune of being brown and therefore suspect in every possible respect to the staff working there. But this lady's travails include, one, being white and presenting as a white Canadian Christian woman. So she encounters some of the more fundamentalist-oriented staff along the way who are only too pleased to be able to pray with her, not to let her out or help notify her family or make her life any more pleasant for her, but pray with her. And interestingly enough, she also documents how that actually helped her feel like there was some hope, which is nice. So I guess you could say, well, it did help her. But, again, only if you're willing to say that being in a Christian prayer circle with a weirdo fundamentalist lady who won't actually do anything to help you except pray with you is a good thing. It's not helpful for everybody or even for most people, I would guess. All right. But if we find some time tomorrow, that might be a good story to share. It just raises some alarms that I think people should be aware of, and I think will appeal to a slightly different crowd. Perhaps if you find yourself in reasoned discussion, let's say, with somebody who might not necessarily share your political leanings, they might be interested in the story of this white Canadian Christian lady who found that sort of prayer offering was a bright spot in an otherwise very dark episode. And they may very well agree and understand very easily and genuinely about why that would be considered a bright spot in an otherwise dark episode. And maybe that'd be the sort of connection that would make them say, if this is happening even to people like that, shouldn't we be maybe taking a second look at what's going on here? And you should. All right, let's see. Here's a couple other things that I thought we might share with you. One, I can give you a link to the story of the French scientist denied entry into the U.S. after the phone messages critical of Trump were found. It's actually a quick read, but I think you know what you need to know just from the headline. This was an intriguing entry that I thought I might read. Don't know whether we're going to have time to squeeze it all in, but we'll give you the gist of it before the next break. With talk of a 51st state, a mystery. Why is Trump obsessed with Canada? And part of the reason that sometimes people are not taking it seriously is that they can't quite get to a serious and understandable reason why Trump is obsessed with Canada. I don't know what their guess is. I have some of my own. I wondered whether they might be in here. This, again, Washington Post by Martine Powers. It is is it an opinion piece? I don't even know. No, it isn't. National news piece. So I guess we're talking about one of the line reporters here, Martine Powers. I don't think we've run into her before. Let's hear what she has to say. The subheader introduces the topic by saying Canadians say that President Trump's 51st state rhetoric is a threat to national security. Theirs, of course, but probably also to ours. They're also perplexed by the origin of his vision for Canadian annexation. All right, let's see what is expressed here. As President Donald Trump argued in recent weeks, for the first time, the third time, the 10th time, to eliminate Canadian sovereignty and convert the country into America's 51st state, messages started arriving in attorney Mitchell Wine's inbox. First one says, a couple friends wrote me, or the quote from him, a couple friends wrote me and said, it's all your fault, Wine recalled with a chuckle. Wine does not, in fact, believe that it's all his fault. Back in 2016, he represented a group of investors who sued Trump, the Trump Organization, the company, and others, alleging that they received false information while purchasing condominiums at the Trump International Hotel and Tower in Toronto. Okay. Possibly because of Trump's controversial brand, the hotel's business struggled. The investors lost money. The building went into receivership. Wine's clients settled, and Trump's name was ultimately removed from the building. I think I remember that incident. The terms of the settlement were confidential, and Trump never admitted wrongdoing. Standard procedure for him with those things. Now, years later, people in Toronto are looking at the failed real estate venture and wondering, is that why Trump is so obsessed with Canada? Well, I have no idea, Wine said. That hadn't entered into my mind, but it's always a possibility with him. He's very, very petty. A White House official, speaking on condition of anonymity to detail the president's thinking, why would you even try to do that, insisted that the 51st state concept sprung unbidden into Trump's mind, that it's a serious proposal, which is weird, and that it's motivated by his belief that annexation would benefit Americans and Canadians alike. Of course, he thinks being raped by Donald Trump would benefit both him and the victim of the rape alike. She was asking for it. Or it doesn't even matter whether she was. When you're a star, they let you do it. You remember all of that. As President Trump has said, this anonymous person is now being quoted. Oh, no, this is non-anonymous. This is a different person. As President Trump has said, Canadians would benefit from lower taxes and secure borders as residents of America's cherished 51st state, White House spokeswoman Anna Kelly said. That's very dumb, but she did say it. Canadians say Trump's vision for Canada as an American accession is insulting, infuriating, and increasingly a serious threat to their national security. A U.S. invasion may not be imminent, they acknowledge, but they believe that Trump's insistence on tariffs against Canadian imports is a real effort to weaken the country's economy to a point that annexation might be a more serious consideration. It's one thing to say it before you're sworn in. It's another thing to say it from behind the seal of the United States on the podium, says David McLaughlin, a Canadian policy expert who was chief of staff to Canadian Prime Minister Brian Mulroney from way back when. We're asking ourselves, why does he keep saying that? It must be because he wants it to happen. Mulroney was he the, I don't know if he was the last, that is to say most recent, conservative PM of Canada, or were there some in between? Is that right? Do I have the right? I'm sorry, Canada. This is ridiculous, and I don't know this off the top of my head. But I do remember Brian Mulroney. Anyway, the theories on exactly what or who prompted Trump's brainstorm, I'm surprised they didn't just say brain fart, range from grand to granular. So here are a couple other guesses on our way out for the next break. The Canadians who've emailed Wine have suggested that the failure of Trump hotels in Toronto and Vancouver also left Trump with the desire for revenge on Canada. It's a maybe. A White House official also, I'm sure, speaking on condition of anonymity, yes, called this suggestion absurd and said the real estate ventures have absolutely nothing to do with it. I don't know how absurd it is, but probably not it. Others, including Matthew Holmes, Executive Vice President and Chief of Public Policy at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, have argued that Trump's annexation talk is a reflection of his antagonistic relationship with former Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, whom he has previously called very dishonest and weak. And then, of course, the theory that his wife has the hots for Trudeau. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I better get started again and get to it. There's a million other things that really need to get on the record here, but I've started with this one. There was the theory that Trump just didn't like Justin Trudeau. Now Trudeau gone, but Trudeau's party's still in control, at least until the next elections. And actually, the more Trump antagonizes the Canadians, the more likely it looks like Trudeau's party, even if he's gone, will retain control. But we'll see. We'll see what happens up there. But there is also that theory out there. People really do say that maybe there's something to the idea, and you can see it in the photos if you want to read body language. Not always the most reliable sign, but it certainly does look like Trump really might. You could, if you go in there with that idea in mind, that Trump dislikes Trudeau because Melania thinks Justin Trudeau is hot. That might be a real thing. It's as easy to understand as a motivation as any for somebody like Trump. It doesn't have to be adult or based in reality in order for it to really obsess him, to overtake his brain. There's not a lot there to overtake, right? In interviews, current and former Trump allies, politically connected Canadians, and foreign policy experts suggested other theories, including that right-wing influencers, Trump's policy advisors, or even a chance encounter at Mar-a-Lago earlier this year could have influenced Trump to begin his 51st state crusade. That's the problem with him. You never know what might have motivated it. It could be just something in passing, get stuck in his brain, and then, he says it, and he's the only one saying such stupid things like make Canada 51st state. That becomes now a trademark line for him. So he continues to do it. Anyway, many Canadians are simply confused. Your guess is as good as mine. Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, said when asked about the genesis of Trump's aspiration to admit Canada to the Union. That's a nice way of putting it. Admit Canada. You're welcome. Come on in. Admit Canada to the Union. We're dumbfounded as to why he's doing this. Former Trump administration officials don't recall the 51st state thing ever coming up during Trump's first term. Me neither. Former Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross. Oh my gosh. Still with us. And former National Security Advisor John Bolton told the Washington Post they'd never heard Trump raise the issue before. Remember Wilbur Ross and his velvet slippers and everything? Holy cow. But Gerald Butts, which is his real name, principal secretary to Trudeau, Canadians know this, and they don't even laugh when you say, you're like, yeah. Come on, grow up, America. Gerald Butts said in a recent social media post that the idea came up a lot during the president's previous interactions with Trudeau. Is that right? Trump began publicly referring to Canada as the 51st state before his second inauguration, but only a little, slightly, right? And he has consistently escalated the rhetoric in the first 2 months of his presidency. I know, we were there. He has argued that incorporating Canada into the United States would reduce Canadians' taxes. I don't even know whether that would be true. Enhance border security and improve Canadian military defenses. This is him. To be honest with you, Canada only works as a state. It would be one of the great states anyway. This would be the most incredible country, Trump said in his Oval Office speech on March 13th, whatever his babbling on March 13th in the Oval Office. Visually, if you look at a map, and that's the way people look at maps, they drew an artificial line right through it between Canada and the U.S., just a straight artificial line. Somebody did it a long time ago, many, many decades ago. It's been a while. And it makes no sense, Trump continued, apparently referring to a 1908 treaty that settled the boundary between the U.S. and Canada. It's so perfect and has a great and it's so perfect as a great and cherished state. It's just not a sentence that makes any particular sense. It's very dumb and childlike, whatever. And then, of course, not an artificial line on a map, says the guy who just drew Sharpie lines on a map to say, yes, this hurricane threatened Alabama, just like I said it did. Look, here's a picture of it not threatening Alabama, but then I draw a line, an artificial line, right through Alabama, saying that it was. All right. Look, that's maps. That's borders. They're all artificial. I mean, you can walk there. There's no dotted line on the ground like it's a cartoon. We put up fences. Well, sometimes paint lines, but nope. They're all artificial. But, almost getting the point. The ironic thing is I've sat down with endless Republicans, said Ford. I wish someone would end these Republicans, but they are endless. He's right. Who last week moved to briefly impose a surcharge on electricity imports to the U.S. before reversing that decision. I don't think we made it to air with the reversal of that decision. But, yeah, it was an interesting idea. They export a lot of electricity and supply a lot of electricity for the upper tier states bordering Ontario. They are perfectly within their rights to do that. But I guess he got advice that would just escalate the situation and make things worse, and he ended up deciding not to go with it, but clearly made an impact. At any rate, not one Republican agrees with him, Trump that is. Behind closed doors, they tell me they have no idea why he's doing it. Pete Hoekstra, do we say Hoekstra? Anyway, Trump's nominee to be the next ambassador to Canada. They haven't gotten around to doing that yet? Jeez. Seemed similarly unsure of what to make of his boss's comments. During his Senate confirmation hearing last week, Hoekstra was asked whether he agreed that Canada is a sovereign nation and should not even jokingly be referred to as the 51st state. So, interesting. That puts him in a tough position. If he wants to be on board with Team Trump, he can't criticize that. But he's being sent as an ambassador to something that if he doesn't recognize it as a sovereign state, one, they should eject him and reject his credentials and not receive him as ambassador. And two, what would we need an ambassador to some place that isn't a state for? Or that isn't a country, a sovereign country? Canada is a sovereign state. Yes, Hoekstra said. How the president and the relationship between the former prime minister and Canada, the characteristics and nature of that relationship, I don't know. Okay. That's actually all right. I mean, that's a straightforward answer. Look, I don't know what the hell he's doing. I don't. Memes and jokes about potential Canadian annexation circulated in right-wing circles online in the year leading up to the 2024 election. Former Fox News host Tucker Carlson and political commentator Tim Pool both mused about the potential for an invasion of Canada, or in Carlson's word, liberating the great nation of Canada from itself. Now, interestingly, the mention of Tucker Carlson and Tim Pool side by side here brings to mind that I did see repeated this morning, a reminder that at some point Justin Trudeau in testifying, I guess before the Canadian Parliament on Russian election interference internationally and at large. He mentioned both Tucker Carlson and I think Tim Pool. Maybe he didn't mention Tim Pool, but he mentioned Tucker Carlson as being essentially having been underwritten, paid by the RT network, that essentially the Russians were subsidizing his work, paying for Tucker Carlson's propagandizing, including about the annexation of Canada, and that Tim Pool likewise had recently been, we reported the story probably just once when it came out, that Tim Pool too was apparently taking money through RT and passing on Kremlin propaganda talking points. And now it interestingly comes to pass that both of them have made prominent mention of the annexation of Canada, which presumably is of some interest to the Russians, particularly, of course, if it's annexed to a country that Donald Trump runs. And I've mentioned my own pet theory about that if you look at it, I was prompted by Donald Trump saying the very dumb thing. Visually, if you look at the map, it would be so impressive. Yes, but if you look at a map or a globe of the entirety of the world, and you realize that the annexation of Canada and Greenland, by the way, to the United States, and just the way the most portion of the northern hemisphere lays out between Russia and the United States, if they're closely cooperating, if there's political union with Russia to own the globalists, we've encircled almost the entirety of the global north here with collaborating and maybe rogue states. They're rogue. They've gone rogue together. Russia, the United States, plus Canada, plus Greenland, with the exception of like Scandinavia sticking up in the middle there. That's it. The entire extreme north of the globe is dominated by one cooperative political entity and a kleptocracy at that. Anyway, that would be bad. Trump also posed the possibility of Canadian annexation over dinner with Trudeau in late November, according to reports from the time, though a Canadian minister who was present for the meeting insisted shortly after that the then president-elect was only joking. Since then, Trump's interest in annexing Canada has become more emphatic. The British newspaper The Telegraph has suggested one potential source, Peter Navarro. He's an idiot. He might have suggested this. That's Trump's trade advisor, who's been promoting the president's tough terms on tariffs against Canada. When asked about whether Navarro has pushed the idea of annexation, a White House official said, speaking again on condition of anonymity, the president came up with the idea himself. You can't not say that. And why anonymity? To say the president came up with this idea his own self. He's a very genius kind of a guy. You don't need to be anonymous for that. You shouldn't be. You get a promotion. Another possible influence, Kevin O'Leary, a.k.a. Mr. Wonderful. What? A.k.a. one of the investor stars on the Shark Tank TV reality show. I don't know the guy. That's some moniker to go by, Mr. Wonderful. I'm Mr. Tremendously Amazing. It's very long. It's a little more difficult to pronounce, but whatever. O'Leary, who is Canadian, has been making the case in recent months for a formal economic alliance between the United States and Canada. We don't have one. Free trade agreement. We had one recently. Anyway, similar to the European Union. Well, okay. So it would be more expansive than a free trade zone. But all that's left, if you're going to be doing, free trade, of course, we've wrecked that with the tariffs, which is kind of the point of this discussion. But if we had a free trade zone, as we had previously, NAFTA, the only thing that's missing then is free movement of people as well across the borders. That's the only thing that would be, that's what would take us closer to being more like the European Union. But that ain't happening in this immigration situation. So I don't know what he's talking about. Anyway, he wants a more formal economic alliance that's more like the European Union, except he's already got it, minus immigration, which he's not going to get, so it's meaningless. But he does say he envisions a combined immigration system, mutual citizenship, and a shared currency. I'm sure He would not, in this political atmosphere, advocate including Mexico in that, but that's what NAFTA was on the trade side. If you want that to be more like the European Union, that's what it's going to entail. But he just won't say so. China, he says, is the problem right now, and it's going to remain so as it tries to become the world's largest economy, O'Leary said last week. If somehow we combine the economies of Canada and the United States, game over. It's over. Nobody could touch us. Unless, of course, the Canadians didn't want anything to do with us and made things difficult. O'Leary was one of the many people in Trump's orbit who flew to Pervalago, I love to say it that way, in January to mingle with Trump and be pervy before the inauguration. During that time, O'Leary recalls he had a conversation with Trump about Canada, his family's dual connections, not loyalties, connections to Canada and the United States, and his affinity for both countries. I don't know if it was something I said that got him thinking about that. No, don't flatter yourself. And that was the beginning of something, but I can't claim that I gave him the idea. Who knows? I have no idea. That's a better answer. On January 6th, Trump posted on Truth Social, many people in Canada love being the 51st state, which they aren't. If Canada merged with the U.S., there would be no tariffs. Taxes would go way down, and they would be totally secure from the threat of the Russian and Chinese ships that are constantly surrounding them. Are they? Together, what a great nation it would be. And they would be totally secure from the Russian ships because America would invite them in and say, there's nothing to worry about. They might still be doing the same sabotage, but you're not allowed to worry about it. You're American now. And we're in political union with Russia. Chinese ships, are they doing it? I don't know. Trump's allies say it's all tough talk meant to enhance his negotiating position in the U.S.-Canada trade war, which he started for no reason. Why do we need a negotiating position in a trade war you don't have to be having? I don't think it's real for a lot of reasons. Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich said, but we don't think he's real, so that's okay. The Senate would be somewhere between Democrat and Socialist for the rest of history. I would not take it as a serious project. Of course, as we mentioned earlier, there's no real reason to believe that he would allow Canadians representation in this new country. Canadian observers say their outrage at Trump's attacks have fueled unprecedented levels of unity and collective defiance. I can't understate how much this is visceral in Canada, said Holmes, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce official. People are feeling a true sense of betrayal. It's personal. The attacks from Trump seem to have buoyed Canada's Liberal Party, which had been primed for an electoral wipeout. Ordinary Canadians, meanwhile, have begun committing conspicuous acts of patriotism, which is always nice. Shoppers at grocery stores are reading the labels of items on the shelves to make sure they're avoiding U.S.-made products. Canadians say they have never in their lives seen so many maple leaf flags flying. I don't know what you were flying, but I saw it everywhere when I went and visited. The mayor of Mississauga, the U is before, Mississauga. We'll say Mississauga announced on Saturday that at the request of many people are requesting this, that's what it sounds like, the city has started to remove all American flags from sports arenas and locations along Lake Ontario. We're not the most unified country in the world, said Wine, the lawyer who was asked if his client's case had fueled Trump's anti-Canada sentiment. But these days we are. These days we love Canada even more because we're so offended by the president's behavior. All right. Well, it didn't exactly solve the mystery, but it didn't say it was going to solve the mystery. It just said it was going to pose the mystery. And so far, the only one that makes, actually has a compelling geopolitical case for it is the one I said. I'm not certain that it's actually true, but at least you would be able to show, you'd really be able to flex and show a lot of dominance, certainly of the Arctic region, if you were going to exploit it for mineral or fossil fuel extraction or what have you. That would be, that's a serious thing. And of course, the idea of being able to circumnavigate the Arctic Circle has been something, the geopolitical players have been after for a long time. And if it was something that you could exert an exclusive zone of control over by cooperating with Russia, well, that could be pretty serious. All right. Other things that I need to enter onto the record. I mentioned to you earlier that there was a courtroom proceeding with respect to the DOGE, the dodgy break-in into USIP, and unfortunately that didn't have the outcome we were hoping for in court. Talking Points memo got right to it at the end of the day. I grabbed their description of the outcome, but there's some great reporting from a lot of online journalists posting to social media who observed remotely the hearing and listened in on what was going on, and it really looked for all the world like the judge was really going to hand them their heads over there at DOGE. And it's set up as an almost perfect case. The things that we told you yesterday about, and did we end up, I don't remember how much of the story we told, but some more of it was revealed in the hearing yesterday, just about how the police ended up there, right? There was the initial reporting on Monday or Tuesday, I guess, that the police were called to the scene, and that it turns out that not only did the USIP leadership call the police to the scene because they were reporting the trespass of the dodgy people in the building, given that they own the building, they should be in the right in pointing this out. But then, as it turns out, the contract security people were the ones who let the dodgy invaders in because they still had physical keys. All their electronic key cards had been disabled, but apparently a very high-ranking person at the private security contractor that had been hired by USIP still had a key. Now, in anticipation of this, they actually, war-gamed this apparently over the weekend at USIP and said, we don't think we can trust these contractors. And indeed, it was the case. It turns out to be the case that the contractors were threatened by DOGE and the DOGE-aligned Trump administration officials who said, we understand you guard a number of federal facilities here in D.C., elsewhere, and we are going to look that up through DOGE, through the Treasury, which we now control, and we're going to cancel all of your contracts unless you use the key that you still have, even though you've been fired. You're no longer working for USIP, but use the key anyway to let us in, or else we'll put the screws to you elsewhere. And they did. Essentially, how dangerous is that, right? You've hired building security, and now there's the danger that your private contractors you hire as building security will switch sides and let the intruders in once you've fired them. Of course, it's amazing that they had the foresight to say, we don't actually trust these guys. We'll handle security internally. Didn't work out very well. Anyway, the upshot of what happened in court is reported here at TPM by Kate Riga. Judge denies emergency relief for fired USIP members after armed dodgy takeover. But so many issues wrapped up in what happened there, including shouldn't the guy who had the key and worked for the private security company that had been fired be charged with something? You can't just retain the key and then use it to enter the premises and let intruders in. Now, mind you, there was also the question of who called the cops, but everybody called the cops, as it turns out. USIP called the cops and said there's intruders outside trying to get in. The people outside, though, called the cops as well, and it involved Ed Martin at the U.S. Attorney's Office, who also called the police himself and said, there's criminal activity going on at USIP, and it's the people inside the building. They won't let the new president in. We have documentation showing that this guy is the new president. Except the documentation we discussed yesterday was just a piece of paper that Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, and then the other guy, was it Peter Garvin, was it? The head of the National Defense University, 3 people who have positions on the USIP board ex officio, but they're just 3 of 15 board members. They claimed that the situation was, well, the president fired the other 12 board members. We're all that's left. We've decided to name a new president. We wrote it down and had a resolution and we adopted it, and here it is. And so that's why this guy is the president and the guy who's inside isn't the president. So police, get the guy who isn't president out, and the guy who is president should be let in. The police decided to buy that story, but they also were assisted in all of this by a third party who has no contractual relationship with either USIP or the government or DOGE. That they just happen to have a key from an old contractual relationship which has since been terminated. That's really, really problematic. So this really set up as a whopper of a case. There was just like really nowhere for DOGE and the Trump administration to stand in this. And yet nothing happens, essentially, which is amazing. The 12 members of the board who were allegedly fired from the board, according to the claims from, the claims underlying the resolution, the so-called resolution that they produced to show that, what's his name? Kenneth Jackson, was it? Or I can't even remember what the guy's name was. Jackson, Johnson, who knows? He's from out of nowhere. He says he's president according to these three guys. These three guys say they're the entirety of the board because the board was fired. But the board wasn't legally fired, and that came up in court. There's a whole statutory procedure for removing people from the board and replacing people on the board, and presumably what a quorum of the board is. So even if you accepted that the other 12 were fired, 3 people doesn't constitute a working quorum. They can't name a new president as between the 3 of them. So that's the piece of paper is bogus, but there it was being presented as evidence as to why they were in the right. And anyway, in the end, the judge basically says, you're wrong on everything, but I don't know what to do. Judge denies emergency relief for fired USIP members after armed DOGE takeover. She added that she's offended by the use of guns and threats by DOGE against American citizens. Kate Riga, like I said, is doing the reporting, while a federal judge Wednesday expressed disgust with DOGE's armed takeover of the U.S. Institute of Peace, or Malheur Wildlife Center. Take your pick. She ruled against the board-fired members' request to be immediately reinstated. Or rather, the fired board members, request. Judge Beryl Howell, who usually doesn't stand for nonsense, of the D.C. District Court, will instead let the firing stand for now, requesting that the parties come up with a schedule to move the case forward quickly. Like, why let those firings stand if they were accomplished in contravention to statute? I don't know. But she wasn't going to issue a temporary restraining order or preliminary injunction against them. She may find in the end later that they were illegally fired, but why not do it now? She found that the fired board members were not likely enough to succeed on the merits or be found to have suffered irreparable harm, pointing both to the uniqueness of the agency, and it's a charitable corporation set up by Congress to operate independently, and the precedent set by the D.C. Circuit in Dellinger versus Besant. In that case, the D.C. Circuit Court nullified a temporary restraining order from the lower court, which had restored the fired head of the U.S. Office of Special Counsel. She delivered her ruling from the bench, and it may have come as a surprise to the lawyers before her. She'd spent much of the 2-hour hearing lambasting DOGE for taking over the USIP building and expelling its staff with armed law enforcement, threats of criminal investigation, and unannounced home visits by the FBI. This conduct of using law enforcement, threatening criminal investigations, using armed enforcement from 3 different agencies, Metropolitan Police Department, Department of State, Security Police, and the FBI, to carry out this executive order, all of that targeting, probably terrorizing the employees and the staffs at the Institute when there are so many other lawful ways to accomplish the goals, she said. Her first remarks to Brian Hudak of the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. Why? Why those ways here? Just because DOGE's in a rush? Later, she asked Hudak if he was offended at how the takeover was executed, saying that she was offended on behalf of American citizens who had been treated so abominably. While DOGE's takeover of USIP echoes its takeover of other small agencies oriented toward foreign aid and peacemaking, it has distinct sinister notes. The board members were fired abruptly by email without any attempt to fulfill the statutory requirements for their removal, much the same as at other agencies. The members of the administration who serve as ex officio members of the board quickly installed their own president, but the use of law enforcement in the USIP takeover sets it apart. With mounting incredulity, Howell pressed the lawyer for the fired board members for details on FBI agents arriving unannounced at the home of the Institute's security chief. As DOGE was seeking ways into the building, there's just so much happening here. She gaped at DOGE's ultimate strategy for gaining entry, threatening all the federal contracts of the Institute's ex-security contractors who still had that key that they ended up using to access the building. She counted up the total number of armed law enforcement on the premises. That's a lot of law enforcement at a charitable corporation's building to enforce this executive order, wouldn't you say? She asked the attorneys, as she mulled granting the fired board members' request for reinstatement and tossing DOGE off the premises. She half-joked that it could spark an armed battle. DOGE hasn't softened its methods, despite losing some other illegal firing battles in the lower courts. Indeed, calls to impeach judges who rule against the administration, often amplified by Elon Musk, have only grown louder on the right, with Trump calling for the impeachment of the radical left lunatic of a judge who temporarily stopped his expulsion of Venezuelan migrants, who turn out not to even be Venezuelan in many cases, under war powers not used by a president since World War II. And then in that rare move, Chief Justice John Roberts released a statement rebuking the calls for judicial impeachment. Still, if the lower court actually haven't stopped DOGE, it's hard to see how Howell's ruling, allowing the firings to stand, no matter how sternly delivered, will slow its raising of the federal government, rendering one of her lines of questioning Wednesday an academic one.
NetworksRadio.com.
I'll tell you in a minute.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Here's the question still pending. What are the legal ways the administration could shrink the federal government without using the force of guns and threats by DOGE against American citizens and those who served our country for years? Will Justice Putnam have a guess as to how it might work? Stay tuned and find out next as he rounds up his version of the stories of the day. We'll see you tomorrow.